Hey guys, Jason Woodard here with Square One Financial Group LLC, and I'm one of the founding partners here. And I have been seeing a lot of stuff on social media about the difference between final expense and a funeral pre-plan. In fact, I have seen a lot of insurance agents say, why can't I just write up a list of things that the person would like or a wish list for their funeral and sell them a final expense policy? So that inspired me to make this video. One, because at our firm, we do both. We do all kinds of stuff in the life insurance house, from offshore premium financing to doing regular life insurance in 31 states here in the great old US of A. And one of the things that's different about funeral pre-planning versus life insurances is that they have different sets of laws and licensing. So I wanted to clear up that we can't just recklessly go around doing that. So that inspired me to go over the 5 differences. They're both great products, right? But they just work differently. So I want to go ahead and review the differences. I made some notes here on my trusty notepad. But the first thing, the biggest difference is cost overall. Okay. There's no difference. Okay. You can plan a $15,000 final expense plan insurance policy with the intent to buy a $15,000 funeral one day, or you can pre-plan a $15,000 funeral. Now, there is a difference in total cost. And total cost is going to be, cost of insurance payments times how long do you pay on it. So when we look on the final expense side, you may pay on that thing for 20 years. Say you're 60 and you pay it off when you're 80. Paying it off means you pay it off with your life. You pass away. These are not participating whole life or cash value whole life policies. So typically, the only benefit that's left in the policy is the actual death benefit. So if you end up paying $25,000 over 10 years, 20 years, and you only have a $10,000 death benefit, that's it. You paid 20,000 for 10, but it was affordable and in place along the way throughout your life when you did not have $10,000. So it did its job. Now, if we compare that to a pre-planned funeral, they can be done in a single pay, 3-year, 5-year, 10-year payment options. You are getting the actual death benefit, but they have something called a growth rate, unlike your final expense plan. So they can accumulate value similarly to a participating whole life policy or a cash value whole life policy. So essentially, long term, they can be paid off in a shorter period of time instead of being there your whole life, like a final expense policy. So those payments can have a time limit where you no longer have to pay. And they also can accumulate value, which is not atypical of a final expense policy. And I will correct one thing just to make sure I'm clear. You could pay for a final expense policy in 1, 3, 5, or 10-year payments as well to save money, but typically that's just not how they're purchased. Okay. Now, what about acceptance? If you're using a final expense policy to handle a funeral, to handle a cremation, that is the biggest reason that I hear people say, I need a final expense plan. Now, if you go to a funeral home with a final expense plan and say, I want to plan my funeral in advance, I have a life insurance policy, they're going to say, well, you're still alive, so you can't use that. There's no value in it to us yet, because that policy requires you to what? Pass away before there will be a death benefit paid out. Okay. So you cannot pre-plan a funeral with a life insurance policy. So it's only accepted upon death. Now, with a funeral pre-plan, you can plan it ahead of time and you can do 2 different things. You can pre-plan for a particular funeral home, meaning you can pull the general price list and plan for them and purchase a pre-planned funeral at the exact cost that company charges. You can leave it assigned or unassigned. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then you could also take that to any other funeral home while you're alive and say, hey, I want this to be my chosen funeral home. They'll review it and say, sure, we'll gladly service you at that time. Let's lock in the cost of your funeral forever so you don't have to pay any more than what you already have here. You hedge against inflation and you're in good shape with your chosen funeral home. Now, Let's talk about your family's benefit. Number 3. Okay. Point number 3. Your family in a final expense policy is only going to get the death benefit. They're only going to get what you paid for by contract, meaning if it's a $10,000 death benefit, that's what they're going to get. Even if over 20, 30 years you paid in $20,000 or $30,000, that is irrelevant. They're going to get the $10,000. Now, with a funeral pre-plan, you have the option, and I'll talk about the option again when I talk about assignments here, and that'll be point number 5. But in point number 3, you have the option of receiving the total of your payments or the death benefit plus the growth rate. Whichever one is higher, you would receive. So your family would essentially be able to pay for the funeral, and then they would have leftover monies that they could use for, in fact, I talked with a client earlier about this, something simple like taking time off work. If I lost my wife, I wouldn't want to be working. I would want to be recovering. That still costs money, okay? So the ability to take time, that extra money could be used for that you might not have in that final expense policy, or that you won't have in that final expense policy, okay? Now, let's talk about leftover cash. That's what we're just talking about, okay? Point number 4, family gets the death benefit. That's it in a final expense policy. In a funeral pre-plan, they get the death benefit plus the additional cash growth rate. And again, I'll clarify, there are participating whole life and cash value whole life policies where you can get the growth rate, or essentially cash value that accumulates tax-free inside of a life insurance policy, but that's a different discussion. That is not a final expense policy, okay? Now, number 5, assignment. This is very, very important, okay? When you take a final expense policy, let's say you've passed, your family's got to take your pre-plan, or they got to take a final expense policy to the funeral home. There's 2 options. In the final expense policy, they're going to take it in, and that funeral home is going to say, sure, we can take that good as cash. We'll contact your life insurance carrier, and we'll contact a third-party vendor that will pay us now, because we have to be paid in full in order to render services. And then the third-party company will charge a 5 to 6% fee, typically out of the cost of the funeral. So if it's a $10,000 funeral, it's going to be $500-$600, okay? And that fee is going to come out of that life insurance policy as well. And the family is going to get whatever's left over from that policy. So if the policy is big enough for what the family wants, will the family have to pay additional? We don't know, because also at the time of need, there's a lot of emotional spending that takes place because it's not pre-needed, meaning they came in with a life insurance policy, but the funeral wasn't planned. Nothing was picked out. You had no say in how much should be spent or how it should be spent, because you never made the plan, right? Now, let's compare that to a funeral pre-plan. Number 1, you have chosen everything. So when they go in, you've provided your family with a roadmap. So it's easy for them to know exactly what they need to do, okay? Number 2, when you hand that plan to the funeral director, they have a roadmap as well that they can follow. It sees every line item, what it's paid for, okay? And then if it's not assigned to them, if it's not assigned, they can take it then for payment, provide the funeral, and the family will get any leftover cash. Now, there's something called assignment, meaning you can say, I want to go to Mr. Bob's funeral home no matter what. You can write a funeral pre-plan. We can teach you how to sign off on it, take it over to Mr. Bob. We can do it for you. Mr. Bob will be happy to have a client that's already pre-planned for his establishment in the future. The difference is Mr. Bob is going to make you a deal. I'll take the assignment to me, and I will guarantee you that the price will never go up. However, any growth is now mine. Are you following me? And that's a big thing to give up. So a lot of people like to do them unassigned, or purchase through a company like Square One versus purchasing directly from a funeral home, because it can be unassigned and the family can still get the cash value, okay? Now, there are some additional benefits if unassigned, and we can get into that if anybody wants more information. You can reach out to us, but I wanted to go over the top 5 biggest differences between final expense insurance and funeral pre-planning when it comes to insurance. So I hope that helps. If you guys have any questions, you can give us a call at 904 pre-plan, or you can check out our website at funeralpreplan.com. If you have any life insurance questions, you can go to our website, squareonefinancialgroup.com, for life insurance, annuities, college funding, debt action planning. But we do use a specific website for funerals. So if you want to check it out, funeralpreplan.com, or you can follow us on social media. So I hope you guys enjoyed the information. And if you have any questions, you can like, comment, share. We'll be glad to get back with you. But share it with your friends. Let's have a topic of discussion. Let's not make taking care of our families ahead of time such a taboo topic of discussion. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.